Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Beats. I am your host, Kelly Kennedy, and I am very fortunate to be able to share my tribe as I travel across the globe and meet incredible scientists and doctors and all sorts of practitioners and continue to expand that tribe to help engage and encourage and empower you to learn how your body really works. Because what we know from our heart to yours is that you have all the innate wisdom inside you to heal, and that our job is naturally oriented therapists, medically enlightened doctors and specialists available here at Not Meds Global. The Beats podcast is about helping you understand that you have that power inside and what you need to do to help engage it, to constantly upregulate your ecosystem. Thank you so much for being part of our community. If this resonates with you, please go ahead and share this episode. We are always open to your comments and your questions as always. And welcome back to this week's episode of The Beats. Welcome back to The Beats with Kelly Kennedy. And today I have one of my esteemed colleagues, favorite guest of all times, Dr. James Odell. And those of you who have been listening to this podcast know very much his resume is extensive. His knowledge is even bigger than his resume. And he's always here to give us cutting edge information. He is a research king, as you can see behind him if you're watching this on video. He's got structuring water behind him, live blood analysis, and he's doing all sorts of things always to dive deep into how the body really works. So today, Dr. Odell, thank you so much for joining us again.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
And so we are going to be talking about a very hot topic today, which is the gene therapy / COVID shots that are being administered and what the reality of that is. And because it is experimental and research, we are learning new things about it all the time. I know in our clinic, we're seeing after shots that there's been a lot of lymphatic stagnancy. We've seen evidence of that as well in research as well. But we're going to be talking about a very in-depth program into that. So I'm going to let Dr. Odell lead. And what I'm going to do, like I've been doing on the last few episodes, is kind of act like the uninformed client to ask the questions that everybody has. So
well, thank you, Kelly. I'd like to get started by putting out this idea that with any kind of medical intervention, we always ask 3 questions with this. Now, this could be surgery or a medicine you may take, or even a natural approach. So we consider this: is it necessary first? The second consideration is it safe? And the third consideration is it effective? And so these 3 things we want to discuss in relationship to the vaccines. Is it necessary? Is it safe? Is it effective? And so I'd like to start with, is it necessary? And as you know, they now have a lot of information on the demographics and very detailed statistics of different age groups that have that survive if they get infected with the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and of all different age groups. The first age group is the 0 to 19 age group. And of course, they have a survival rate that's very, very high, 99.997. Now, that's quite a survival rate. Now, of course, they may get sick, but just like any flu or cold, usually it passes within a few weeks' time. And then you develop permanent antibodies that will last your life long. So the second group is the age 20 to 49 group, and that's a 99.98% survival rate. Then we have the 50 to 69, and that's a 99.5% survival rate. So as you can see, as the ages go up, it goes down just a fraction of a point. At the 70 plus age group, it's 94.6. Now, this is about the age in which a lot of people their immunity is starting to dwindle, and they also have different comorbidities, such as heart disease, lung disease. They may have liver impairment, other kinds of functional impairments, and actually be taking a whole host of other kinds of medicines. So it's expected that that age group would have more problems. And it's just always been the way it is that the elderly, when they get influenza, are always the most predisposed to it and have the most problems with it. So coronavirus is no different. Here they say with the flu, that 80% of flu is usually influenza, the other 20% are coronaviruses. So coronaviruses have been with us since the beginning of time. Most of us have been exposed to coronaviruses and probably have developed antibodies to it, some of us more than others. Now, so that's the idea first, is it necessary? Well, given that survival rate and the fact that also we have early protocols that can treat it with it. And if you treat it early, then this will keep you from going into the hospital. So you have a time period from when you catch it and start developing a symptom of about 1 to 2 weeks before it really becomes, if it progresses, it becomes severe, it becomes an inflammatory type of problem in the body. And starts to inflame the lung or whatever, if it does progress. As I say, most people recover without going through that inflammatory process. However, there are early treatment protocols, and unfortunately, the CDC and other types of government agencies, medical agencies, even independent agencies, have not really given doctors an early treatment protocol that they can use. And so many doctors, independent doctors, have come up with their own. Like you have the Zelenko protocol, Vladimir Zelenko, who's I highly encourage people to watch all of his podcasts. He's a brilliant doctor, has treated over 6,000 coronavirus patients, and with success, and meaning success that they have successfully survived and gone on to live a normal life. And he uses a protocol that incorporates different types of things, mainly hydroxychloroquine and zinc, and different types of what they call iodophores of zinc, which they help the zinc get into the cell. So, but his protocol has been very successful. Now, many other doctors throughout the United States and elsewhere have also come up with other types of early interventions that keep people from going into the hospital. So people shouldn't wait. They just shouldn't just like wait around until they get like really, really sick and then go into the hospital, and then it's at a bad point. So early intervention, just like any disease, really, we're always treating early, or we're trying to prevent it in some way, is very, very important. And that can help the situation more than we know. So is it necessary to have a vaccine? Well, if the survival rate is that good, and if there's early interventions that are successful, even if you do get it, then chances are maybe the vaccine isn't so necessary for everyone, okay? But particularly for younger people, if you're looking at it that way, we're going to give this the benefit of the doubt. And certainly for younger people, younger than 50. For older people, we have a question about it, because the vaccines have some side effects. And so that's when we get into the safety issue. Is it safe? Now, there are different reporting systems. Europe has its reporting system, and the United States has its reporting system of vaccine adverse events. And the VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, is a reporting system of the CDC, has since from December the 14th, 2020 to August the 13th, 2021, just about a week or so ago, about a month or so ago, has reported 13,000 deaths have been reported as an adverse event from the vaccine, and 595,000 total adverse events. Now, that's almost 600,000 total adverse events. Europe is ahead of that in their reporting. Now, we have to consider VIRS may not be accurate. Those numbers may not be accurate. They are actually underreported and under-recorded. So what does that mean? That means that there was a Harvard study done some time ago that showed that the VIRS probably only 1% was reported of the adverse events of vaccines in general was reported to VIRS. So we could estimate that it is definitely underreported. Many people, they get vaccinated and they have an adverse event and they just don't know how to report it, or they got the vaccine at like Walgreens or some other place that, and though they don't report it, so it just goes underreported.
And my understanding, if you will, from the reporting perspective is one of the obstacles in reporting is, and with all medicine, it's about documentation, of course, that you have to know exactly the date of the vaccine, the lot number of the vaccine, and that's not always readily information, particularly if you're going to one of these, come in and get your free flu shots. They're not necessarily recording all that in a detailed way necessarily, and that you might also not, that adverse effect might not happen the minute it occurs. It might be 3 weeks, 3 months down the road. And it might not be that you link it back to the vaccine, which could also represent a huge portion of those unreported things at VIRS.
Exactly. So we have the underreporting. We also have the under-recording. And so if, just as you said, if you don't have the lot number, if you don't have all of the details that has happened, they won't record it. They won't take the case and put it into their database. There's been a question about their database. Is it accurate? Are they actually coming up? Are they actually reporting? Are they reporting what has been reported to them? And so we could only on good faith assume that they're honest, that the CDC is honest, even though they're in the vaccine business. And that would be the case there, that hopefully they are, but many people feel that this is a problem, in other words, a bigger problem than what is being reported. Now, a lot of this never even gets into mainstream media. You have to go into other sites in order to find this information, but it grows every week. By as many as 700 deaths or more are reported every week. Now, again,
from
that is
the shot. The deaths are from the shot. Just so
from, yes, this is an adverse event that has been that has happened. A lot of it is within a few hours of the shot. Some of it is within a day or two. Some of it is within a week. Usually not more than that, but that's what what's being reported. So, is it safe? Well, in view of this and in view of what's going on in Europe and around the world, it seems like that, no, it's not safe for everyone. That's for sure. And that we just don't know the long-term safety of this either, because there hasn't been any long-term studies done. So in a minute, I'll get into the pathology of that, and I'll kind of talk a little bit about the long-term potential long-term effects of it. But lastly, we go into, well, is it effective? Okay, now effective means that it should prevent transmission. It should prevent a person from becoming infected. That's what normally vaccines do. But here, neither of those things are true. That it doesn't prevent you from catching it. It doesn't prevent you from transmitting it. What the CDC says is that it may help to mitigate the symptoms. In other words, it may lessen the symptoms so that you don't have to be hospitalized. However, we know this is not exactly true, because we hear a lot about these breakthrough situations. Israel is probably one of the most vaccinated countries in the world. So they've been kind of a model to us to see how effective this vaccine is. That we now know that Israel is reporting 60% of their hospitalizations are among the vaccinated. So
for COVID, for
yeah,
SARS-2 COVID. So
exactly.
they're getting the vaccination and yet they're still ending up hospitalized with COVID.
Yes. So they
60%.
get the vaccine and then they become hospitalized with COVID. So 60%, that's more than half.
Yeah.
So, you may hear in the media that it's only the unvaccinated. No, that's not true at all. And of course, there's many doctors around the United States that are also reporting the same thing. They're saying that the hospitals are full of vaccinated people. So is it effective? No, it doesn't appear to be effective. And that's why they're talking about a booster, right? And Israel are saying, well, let's give them a booster. So it's, there's a theme in medicine that if you keep trying the same thing and it fails and you expect different results, maybe that's insanity. And so this is kind of insanity. You keep trying to vaccinate people, but it doesn't seem to work. It doesn't spread help with the contagiousness of it, and it doesn't help you from becoming infected with it. So the question, and it has this safety issue with it, and is it really necessary? So when you consider all of these things together, the necessity of it, the safety of it, the efficacy of it, it really puts it into question, right? So, or at least it should put it into question in people's minds that want to think a little bit more deeply on it. But please don't take my word for any of this. I want people to do their own due diligent research into it. And I think it's very sad when people don't even know what they're being injected with, and they haven't really understood the consequences of the potential consequences of it. So as far as the informed consent about it, they've never really been explained that what this vaccine is to do or isn't to do. And so they're very ignorant about it, and they just blindly are led into this thinking this is it, and they trust, they're trusting our government and powers that be to make the decisions for them. And that may not turn out very well is the way it's looking. Okay. So it's important anytime you choose to do something like put a biological medicine, particularly an experimental one that's never been used before, into your body, to have a better understanding of it, and possibly to pause and to do your research. It's not a 911 situation. You don't have to run out and get it. You have time to do your research and then to make an informed decision about whether this is right for you or not. And so, as I say, don't take my word for it. Please do your own due diligence research and look into this. If you've already had a vaccine, then we'll be talking about that, what you can do possibly to mitigate any side effects that you may experience down the road. So let's talk a little bit about, you go ahead, Kelly, if you want to ask me something.
So what I wanted to just talk about the immune system for a minute, right? Because there's different types of immunity.
Yes.
And at some point, Dr. Odell and I are going to be doing a mini class on immunity. We just have not had a chance to schedule that with all the things that I have going on. But he has agreed to help me with that class to help educate people about immunity. But just as a really quick understanding, we really have three types of immunity. We have innate immunity, we have acquired immunity, and then we have passive immunity, right? And acquired immunity is what you were talking about in regards to the young kids that are getting it. They develop the lifelong antibodies, regardless of the variant, Dr. Odell. Is that true?
Yes, regardless of the variant. Like the Delta variant is 99.7% the same genetic sequence as the original. And basically it's the same as the original. But they come out with the scare tactics. So, oh God, it's a new variant and it's more contagious and virulent and blah, blah, blah. That SARS-1 is about 80% the same as SARS-2. And we know that SARS-1, the people that developed antibodies during SARS-1, those antibodies are effective for SARS-2.
Oh, interesting.
And so if it's effective at 80%, then it's certainly effective at 99.7%. All right. So it's not hard to do the math.
And the passive immunity or vaccinations, immunizations is, looking outside the body and getting something to create this immunity, which I would love to delve into that, and whether or not does it actually effectively create this passive immunity. And I think from previous podcasts, episode 42, the only one that I can quote all the time, is where we discuss, the gene therapy and what it does, and the prions and the spike proteins and so forth, and the guesstimation of everything has to go right in the body for it to have the outcome that they are postulating that this will have. So everything has to go exactly perfect for it to have this passive immunity. But yet what we're finding is that even though they're getting this shot supposedly with a passive immunity, which is supposed to make them not transmit it, it still is transmissible, and they're supposed to not be able to get it, but they are still getting it. Just to confirm that everybody understands what we're talking about.
Yes, for a vaccine to work, it must produce a neutralizing antibody, and that's very specific antibody for that specific virus, but it neutralizes it. And so, but it's never certain that a vaccine will produce neutralizing antibodies. A lot of times they don't. They produce non-neutralizing antibodies. And so that means it won't help. It won't confer any kind of immunity. Certainly those types of antibodies can fade out over time, so to speak, and that's why they give boosters. So as you know, like we get childhood disease that we develop antibodies for our whole life. But if you're getting vaccinated for measles, mumps, things like this, you have to get boosters in order to boost those antibodies, because not all of them are neutralizing, and you're trying to develop those neutralizing antibodies. And so that's basically it. You're looking at, there's two types. There's from natural infection, the antibodies are stronger and they're more neutralizing. From a vaccine, a lot of times it misses and it doesn't produce that neutralizing antibody.
Well, and this is a question sorry.
A little bit more when we talk about antibody-dependent enhancement.
Okay.
But okay. That's, just to keep in mind that the vaccine doesn't always produce the antibodies that you're intending, that you want, not like the actual infection. So that's why people with the natural immunity for coronavirus are exponentially more protected than with the vaccine. And this is
with the acquired immunity, essentially, that we want to get it. This is the concept that, why do I want Silas to get chickenpox? So he acquires an immunity to the varicella virus that is the contributor, as well as Epstein-Barr virus, to getting chickenpox and shingles later in his life. If I can get him chickenpox now, he'll get lifelong antibodies to that virus, and as similar as they are along the shingles and the mononucleosis and so scarlet fever, all those things, that it's on that same line, if you will. Does that?
Yes, exactly. Like with my daughter, when she went off to college, I did some titers on her, and I did basically most of the childhood types of illnesses, and I found that she had these neutralizing antibodies, that her titers were high. And but she never, as far as I know, really she never came out with any of the symptoms, diseases. Yes, any of the childhood diseases. It really didn't manifest. Neither was she vaccinated for them. So what that means is that you don't necessarily have to manifest the disease in order to build an antibodies. A lot of us build antibodies kind of behind the scenes, if you will, where we're not manifesting a symptomology, an overt symptomology like breakout in a cough or a sore throat or whatever it may be, that we might just have a very mild kind of feel weird, but at the same time, underneath it all, our body is producing these neutralizing antibodies. So, and that's the way it is certainly with children. Children seem to, I mean, they're exposed to viruses and bacteria and all kinds of pathogens all the time. We all are. And they're always producing neutralizing antibodies to these, ever since the beginning. So it's just important to understand that the vaccines don't confer lifelong immunity, and that's why we get booster shots. And that's what they're after. They're after to people to get more boosters, and they have them all kind of lined up. Well, of course, this is an industry. We have to understand this is an industry, and that they make money off of what they do, and it's not always for the benefit of mankind here. So it doesn't appear to be working so well, and that's why a lot of people say it's really not a vaccine, that it doesn't fit the criteria of a vaccine in protecting you and also protecting others. So it only mitigates the symptoms if at best, and that apparently it doesn't do that for everyone. So a lot of people still end up in the hospital.
So, okay. Everybody take a breath.
Okay, well, what I'd like to talk
Good,
about—
and really good, deep information. What are we going to talk about next, Doctor?
Yeah, what I'd like to go into is the pathophysiology of the vaccines, kind of what some doctors are coming up with and what we're starting to understand and know. And much of that comes from actually the pathophysiology of coronavirus, right? So we know now when people get sick, very sick, exactly what happens to them. And it's the same thing with the vaccines, because the vaccines mimic the disease. So within the messenger RNA Pfizer and Moderna shot, there's around 40 trillion messenger RNA molecules that are injected, 40 trillion. And these messenger RNA molecules enter into your deltoid muscle, and about 25% of them reside there. The other 75% enter into the circulatory system, enter into the lymphatics as well as the vascular system of the body. Now, from there, they migrate to your organs, glands, and tissues, but through your vascular system, they attach themselves to the endothelium of the vessel. This is the inner lining of the vessel, because that's where the ACE2 receptors are. There's a lot of ACE2 receptors in the endothelium, so they attach themselves there, and that's what they've been trained to do. So these messenger RNA molecules attach themselves into the inner lining of the blood vessels all the way down to the capillaries. Now, if we think about what a capillary is only 2 cells thick as far as the wall. It's a very, very thin vessel, and it's a very small vessel. And that's the end of the line. That's where red cells and nutrients are released to the tissues, and carbon dioxide is taken up. So that vessel has to be smooth. That endothelium, that lining of the vessel has to be smooth to allow red cells to go single file through that vessel. Now, what happens is the messenger RNA lodges there, and then it does what it's programmed to do. It produces spike proteins. Spike proteins are spiky, and what they do is they create a roughness to that vessel wall. So along comes platelets, and platelets view that as an injury. And the platelets adhere to the vessel wall there and create a microclot. And so the potential of creating microclots throughout your whole body is great. And in other words, that is one of the pathophysiological problems is clotting. And that's what a lot of people come up with, in the very beginning, is their reaction has to do with vascular problems in their brain, like with strokes, in their eyes, in their sensory nerves, in their heart and lungs. And over time, that this magnifies. And what can happen is that the capillaries within the lungs become occluded with this clotting and can't deliver the blood to the into the alveolus of the lungs. This is where the exchange of oxygen happens. So the pressure in the lungs increases, and you get a pulmonary artery hypertension, and that puts a strain on the right side of the heart. And it can lead to right side heart failure, maybe not like right away, but certainly down the road. Now, if a person already has existing heart disease, or if they have existing lung disease, then it could happen sooner than later. But as you've heard, many young people have developed myocarditis, and this is an inflammation within the pericardium and the myocardium of the heart, and they end up having a damaged heart. Now, some organs regenerate, like the liver and the kidneys have regenerative properties, but the heart does not, and neither does the lung or the brain. And so the damage that's done there from these microclots is permanent, and it's lifelong, and it could lead to other types of degenerative diseases and death. So the microclotting issue is a concern, a huge concern.
I want to unpack that a little bit, because I'm trying to come up with an analogy for people to understand that who aren't heavy science brained. So like add to my analogy, if you will, and tell me where I'm wrong. So the capillaries are like roadways. Okay, they're like toll booths that have to open up, and they've got to be smooth because my car can just fit through it. But if they've got these spikes that are coming out on either side of the toll booth, when my car goes through it, it gets stuck, if you will. Okay. Yes. I don't really have a good analogy for the platelet, but then the cop comes along, he's the platelet, and he's like, hey, there's a problem over here, and I'm going to just stay right here until I figure out the problem. He's the platelet. Okay. So the
car wreck is what it is. It's a car wreck, and it creates traffic jam.
And then the cars can't move through. So and it's lifelong. It just stays there. And yes. Now the traffic behind it can't move. And if this is happening at your alveoli, which are like, think about a tree and the branches of the tree, they're like the outside of the branches that are allowing the oxygen to exchange with the rest of the body and take the dirty blood, if you will, and bring in the clean blood. Air, take out the dirty air, bring in the clean air, and then circulate it through the whole body. But how can it circulate if there's traffic jams at all the toll booths?
Yes,
I think
sense? That's good. So essentially,
really smart. He's really smart, and I can somewhat follow along with Dr. Odell, but I just wanted to bring that down to a level where people could begin to understand that and not get too lost in what he's saying, but really go back and listen to that now that you understand that analogy, and perhaps you'll understand that even deeper, to realize that this is creating a permanent damage to the endothelial cells that are lining every blood vessel in your body that should be smooth. And when they're sharp and spiky, they create this traffic jam, which stops blood flowing and air circulation. And therefore you're going to have more damaging long-term effects like strokes and myocarditis and heart failures that are going to continue to happen faster because you've set up all these traffic jams within this messenger RNA situation.
Exactly. And that's what they're programmed to do. The other thing is, we don't know how long messenger RNA creates spike proteins. There's really not a lot of information on it. So is this forever? Are people going to be creating these spiky proteins forever? The whole idea in creating a spike protein would be ideally to create a neutralizing antibody to the spike protein. But the damaging effects initially for many people have been terrible, and over time it could be even worse. So there are doctors that understand this, and they're doing certain testing to determine if they do have if a person does have microclots developing. One test is called a D-dimer. And this is a test that's often used for like strokes and various types of deep vein thromboses and pulmonary emboluses. In other words, conditions in which there's abnormal clotting or a clot in the body. And it gives the information about the presence of a clot. But if you have lots and lots of clots throughout your body, then the D-dimer will be high.
Okay.
And there's a doctor in Canada that's been doing D-dimer testing on vaccinated patients and finding that over 60% have high D-dimers. So the idea that microclots are a rare circumstance is not true. That what we're finding is that it's actually a pretty common circumstance. And depending on your health and your vascularity, you'll could maybe survive this, but a lot of people don't, and they end up with severe types of diseases and death.
And this would make sense to me from the lymphatic world, what I'm seeing in the clogged lymph, that's backing up because the cardiovascular system and the lymph are so working hand in hand. And when these spike proteins are creating these microclots, then we're getting stagnicity in the lymph. And I'm seeing people with edemas that haven't had edemas before. I'm seeing like lumpy, things, particularly in the axillary of the deltoid in which they had the shot on that same side.
Exactly. So that's the first thing that could happen. We're thinking of adverse events in 3 stages, okay?
Okay.
Adverse events in 3 stages. The first stage would be the microclots and damage to the organs as a result of the microclots. This is anywhere from the time of the shot, and some people immediately go into seizures. I'm sure you've seen pictures of that on television. Or up into about 3 months. So this is a time period in which microclots could develop, okay? Now, it doesn't mean they'll stop there, but that's one time period. Another time period is between after 3 months to maybe about 2 or 3 years. And what potentially could happen there is what's called antibody-dependent enhancement, or pathogenic priming, or disease enhancement. It's given different names. And it's really been a thorn in the side of vaccine makers for a very long time. Part of it is that when making antibodies, not all of the antibodies that the vaccine makes are neutralizing antibodies. And the antibodies may bind to the virus in such a way that it actually helps the virus enter into the cells more easily. So it assists the virus instead of neutralizing it, all right? So it enhances it. And this can cause a person to become more severely infected. And this is what happened in the early days of testing coronavirus vaccines back in 2002 through 2005. They did, after the SARS-1, they tried to develop vaccines for coronaviruses. And there was many attempts, and of course they always do animal studies first.
Right.
And they did studies with ferrets, with rabbits, with mice, with rats, most of the animals that they usually do studies with. And they found that in almost all cases, there was antibody-dependent enhancement. So what that means is when they vaccinated the animal and then they re-exposed the animal to the virus, that instead of protecting, instead of the vaccine protecting that animal, it allowed entry of the virus into the animal. It over-enhanced the immunity, causing a cytokine storm. This means inflammatory chemicals, or cytokines, a type of inflammatory chemical. And that overwhelmed the system. And in the certain animals, it caused autoimmune hepatitis. and other animals, it causes infiltrates in the lungs. So it created a systemic effect of inflammatory effect that it should have protected against that virus, but instead it allowed entry of that virus into the body to create an inflammatory response that was an over response. And so they often call it disease enhancement or pathogenic priming. You primed the body for a pathogen. You prepared the body for this pathogen. So ADE, they call it, or antibody-dependent enhancement, is a real concern because it happened with the animals and with the SARS-1, back when, and they really didn't exclude it from the trials this time. And a lot of times it doesn't happen right away. It may not happen for several months until you're re-exposed to a specific pathogen, and then your body overreacts.
So instead of giving the body instead of the vaccine creating an antibody, essentially the vaccine has an opposite effect where it makes the virus enter the cell, which causes the body to have an overstimulated immune response, creating these chemicals called cytokines, which sets the body up for systemic, a whole body inflammation, which, if you don't know anything about health, inflammation is bad. You can know nothing about holistic bioregulatory medicine, and inflammation is not what we want. We want to reduce inflammation. So and then that inflammation advances, because now the train is different. So it advances the disease of whatever was there before, or perhaps just this disease, that it creates a more extreme response, and therefore the person gets even sicker than they would have had they not had the vaccine. Is that what you're saying, Dr. Odell?
That's correct. The vaccine primed them to become worse. And later on, after they're exposed, instead of really neutralizing it, it created some binding type of antibodies that allowed entry of the virus into the body, creating an over response in the immunity, creating inflammation. And that can attack different organs. I mean, it could attack the lungs, it could attack the liver, or other organs. What they say is that a lot of it can potentially attack the uterus and the ovaries and cause infertility. So, there is a lot of information coming out about that. And that's a scary thought too, that these vaccines may cause sterility in not just females, but males too. So if that's the case, then we're really in for a shock of humanity, because, think about all the people that are being vaccinated, and if that impairs their ability to have children, well, then you're going to see a huge depopulation issue. Now, I'm not going to go into that, but that's certainly could be the case.
I've had a lot of clients, and I know my colleagues as well. I'm sure you have as well. We haven't discussed this primarily, but we've had a lot of clients with either they stopped getting their period or they're getting it too much, and myself included. I am of the menopausal age, but I do not test as though I'm menopausal. However, my cycle has been anywhere from 12 days to 52 days over the course of the last year and a half. And it's been, when I travel more, it changes, and it can change anywhere from I don't get it to I get it too early. And I see the same with clients. And, honestly, at this point in my life, not that I want to acquire infertility in this way. I'd be okay with a little infertility at 47 years old. I don't necessarily want to have a baby right now. But that being said, I would like that to just happen naturally, and not because of exposures to, mRNA and spike proteins being exposed to my body, causing me to have spike proteins perhaps in my uterus that's causing
ovaries, yeah.
Because I think
exactly
the uterus and ovaries probably are not regenerative as well, like the liver, like the lung and the brain, right? I don't know that. Mm-hmm. The heart, the lung, and the brain are not regenerative, whereas the liver is, the intestines are. What are your concepts?
Well, yeah, generally, your endocrine system is very fragile too. Right. And, a lot of times those cells, if they're damaged, cannot repair themselves either. But if you look at Pziers and some of the adverse events, many of them are miscarriages. So we have that as a problem already. And of course, these vaccines, none of them are tested on pregnant women, nor are they tested on lactating women. We don't know if, are the spike proteins passed on through the milk or not, or
The placenta.
Placenta. There's just a lot of unknowns here because we're, in a learning curve here. This hasn't been given time like any vaccine, like because it's really not a vaccine, but they haven't been given time enough to really explore all of these issues, which usually can take anywhere from 6 to 8 years, and particularly with long-term effects. And that's what I'd like to talk lastly about. And so we have the first set of it is a lot of the vascular problems with clotting, with microclots, strokes, myocardial problems. And then we have the ADE problem with immune enhancement causing cytokine storm. We don't know over the years if this is going to cause autoimmune problems, if it's going to cause cancers. We just don't know. But there is some speculation that it certainly could. So that, again, it puts a pause on it, like, well, shouldn't we really know a long-term, at least over a few years' time, before we jump into, injecting ourselves with something like this? So I know there's probably listeners out there that have already taken the vaccine and they may be concerned. They may go, well, what do I do? But what I can tell you is, just like with anything, the first thing is that you have to consider all of this information yourself and do your own research. Do you really want to do another booster? All right. And you could stop the process now and not do another booster. And because it's going to be booster after booster, I can promise you.
Yep.
And that with the swine flu, they stopped, dead in their tracks giving swine flu vaccines after about 40 people died and started, developing Guillain-Barré. So here we have close to worldwide reported maybe over 40,000 people have died, and 1,000 times that many, and yet they haven't stopped. All right, they're full on and pushing for boosters. Now I know in many countries they've also are mandating it too, and that's that gets into more political and medical freedoms issues. Here I'm just talking about the pathophysiology of the vaccines and things to consider, the safety, efficacy, all these things to consider, without going into the medical freedom issues, which I think are very important as well. Our body is our body, and so
if they're vaccinated already, they should really consider or not to perhaps not do the booster. What else can they do if they've been already vaccinated?
You treat your body like you want to enhance your immunity in some ways, so that you don't become infected and create and develop an antibody dependent enhancement. So things that are known to be helpful are zinc. And zinc's unlike iron. Iron, we have storages of iron, but zinc we don't. Zinc, it should be a daily affair. So you're taking zinc. And with the Zelenko protocol advocates zinc, and he goes way up there, like 240 milligrams of zinc. But yeah, it's a lot. And as you know, that zinc, high doses of zinc over a long period of time, you could develop a certain degree of toxicity. It could displace copper and have other kinds of issues with it. But generally safe in the range of 25 to 50 milligrams a day, generally safe. And so for most adults. Now that, I think RDAs are in between like 11 and 17, something like that. But certainly people could take zinc, and there's many forms of it out there. I know that it's hard to find it on the shelves anymore because people have gotten the word that, you know, zinc is important. We think zinc and with this illness. So there's also what they call ionophores of zinc, and these because zinc has trouble getting through the membranes of the cells, the membranes made up of fats, and so these are little carrier molecules that help to carry zinc into the cell. One of them is quercetin, and so quercetin is a flavonoid. There's also flavonoids in green tea, so you know, drinking green tea is another advantage of that, is to getting these flavonoids that help you utilize zinc better. Beyond that, we also know that people that are deficient in zinc are the ones that seem to be more predisposed to getting infected and having also a worse time of it. And it's the same thing with vitamin D. D3 is very important and should be used in a preventative protocol or even a therapeutic protocol that a lot of research has come out that people that are deficient in zinc are the ones that are hospitalized. And so that's not a surprise because we know that's true with cancers too, that many people with cancers are very, very low in vitamin D. Vitamin D is one of the few vitamins that conventional medicine actually tests for these days because they know, you know, have the importance of it, and not just in relationship to bone and bone health, because it helps with calcium utilization, but it's also very important in immunity, just like zinc. So those two things, zinc and D3, maybe in an ionophore of zinc, like quercetin. If you wanted to go beyond that, you could certainly use vitamin C. Vitamin C is an antioxidant, and I think it's a very useful broad spectrum antioxidant. It's always been said it's good for colds, and I think this is true.
Well, he just listed our entire protocol that we have at True Wellness. So we have 3 protocols to prevent COVID, if you have COVID actively, and if you've been vaccinated. The only thing that really changes isn't the remedies, it's just the dosage of the remedies, essentially.
Yes, I would say so. I think that that's a good way to think about it, is that, you know, these are things that have been tried and true, and there's a lot of research. I mean, I'm writing an article about zinc right now that'll be in the BRMI November newsletter.
Awesome.
And the importance of zinc. But I'm astounded at the research behind zinc that's out there, and particularly even in its reference to COVID, the SARS-CoV-2, and how important it is.
That's good.
So now there's also, you know, getting into pharmaceuticals. You know, you have ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, and these also seem to be ionophores of zinc, interestingly enough. So this may be one of the reasons why they work so well. Zinc inactivates the replication of the virus. So zinc inactivates the replication of the virus. It also plays into many immunological enzymes. It's important for them to work. So
I've been using Zincocheel from Sanum.
Okay.
Because we can get that from Canada.
Uh-huh.
And
well, you know, there's many kinds of zinc. You got zinc gluconates, zinc sulfates, zinc picolinates, and I don't think it matters a whole lot, you know, as long as you're getting it in your body, and maybe you're trying to get an ionophore with it. If you could find quercetin out there, good luck. But if you could find it on the shelf or
we have some at True Wellness. We've been stockpiling it for months.
Yeah, you want to stockpile this stuff because it may not be around, just like food and water. May not, you know, these things may not be around for a long time. So the shelves are getting depleted. But we're having more and more troubles here in my office in ordering these things.
Well, we are too. We are
back
too.
ordered.
And I know our client base that's looked to try to get ivermectin from the medical doctor community. That's become exceedingly more difficult, and different pharmacies won't even talk to you, like Costco, Rite Aid, CVS. They won't even discuss ivermectin, whereas some of the others will, but you need a script, and it's really become, a push. But I would just want to say too, from our protocol perspective, we also added a macrophage white blood cell enhancing topical ointment for the lymphatics to be placed over the nodes, and a reboost nasal spray that has echinacea in it to just help overall boost immunity. And it has like ranunculus in it and different things like that, that are plant remedies that have been known to help win viral counts as a nasal spray or a throat spray. And propolis, one of your favorite all-time products, propolis, which is a bee product, which just helps to protect and prevent. And so, we're not saying, it's all about freedom of choice. And like Dr. Odell said, please do your own research. And a great place to do that research is at BRMI.online, which is an incredible resource that's nonprofit, no commercials. You'll never see a commercial there. That's just empirical based data. That Dr. Odell is keenly the founder of this organization, and really works diligently to comb through the research with his board of advisors to make sure that all the data there is cutting edge and again, empirically based. So that's a great place to research. And you always use that other research. What's the other thing that you always use for research? I can never.
Well, I mean, there's several places you can go. You could do a Google Scholar. You can,
Google
Medline.
Scholar. I can never remember it for the life of me.
Yeah,
Google Scholar.
There's actually numerous ones out there, and unfortunately, Google is heavily censored, and so sometimes you have to go through back doors and to find information. But if you do your due diligence, you'll find the information. It's there, and it's still there. And so, but I appreciate you talking about BRMI, and we do our best there in putting out information on diagnostics and therapies. We also have a news section, and we try to keep things current and what's going on in the news. We have a lot of videos on doctors talking about COVID and talking about therapies for COVID and other types of important topics. Yeah, please do go brmi.online and check it out.
And sign up for the
newsletter.
The newsletter, which is absolutely so chock full of content. I just don't know how he does it. I'm convinced.
Yeah, it's our e-journal. Is what it is.
Convinced Dr. Odell doesn't sleep. He just he just researched. That got a little sped up there, but can I ask you one more question? Do you have enough time?
Sure.
So we talked a lot about Pfizer and Moderna today because those are the gene therapies. So actually, it's two questions. One is there's been a lot of information in the last few weeks saying that Pfizer is now been licensed by the FDA, but I believe that is a misunderstanding of the approval of which they got.
Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, fine. Okay. Well, yeah, actually, they licensed Comirnaty. Okay, Comirnaty is a Pfizer product, but it's not on the shelf yet. Okay, it's being produced. It's in production, and it is a messenger RNA Pfizer product. Now they say it's almost the same thing as the current Pfizer product, but it's not exactly the same thing. It's not. So the current Pfizer product technically hasn't been licensed. It's still under emergency authorization use, EAU use. All right. So, I know that sounds a little confusing, but so in some ways it's a bit deceiving to say that, oh, the Pfizer vaccine has now been licensed. What they really need to specify is the Pfizer Comirnaty vaccine has been licensed,
which isn't on the market yet.
But isn't on the market yet. And so they still have this other Pfizer vaccine out there that actually hasn't been licensed, though the CDC says, well, it's almost the same thing and you could use it instead of, but technically it's different, and legally it's different, legally. So there's some legal issues there that have a lot to do with who are you going to sue if something happens to you. If it's under emergency authorization use, you can't sue. But if it's been licensed, then you can go to vaccine court and sue. So with this vaccine, it's still under the one that's out there right now is still under EAU. It's not actually technically been licensed. It's the community.
Even though it's similar to Comirnaty, which is in production, which has been licensed, but is yet not on the market. Okay, good, awesome. And the second question, thank you so much, Odell, Dr. Odell. And the second question is about the J&J. That's more of a vaccine. We talked about that in episode 42, but I would still like people to consider the first three questions we asked, which is it necessary, is it safe, and is it effective? And are we finding similar, are there any VAERS reports in regards to J&J that you've seen?
Oh, absolutely. You know, the VAERS is, the J&J has been also a problematic vaccine, particularly in clots and strokes and seizure activity and this kind of thing. It is injecting a spike protein, though it's not messenger RNA, it is a spike protein. Spike protein is the pathogen. It is the pathogen. And so you're injecting a pathogen into the body, and that may not turn out well. So it's not a classical vaccine in the sense, it's a little different than what has been, we took when we were children. It's quite a bit different. So no, I don't think the J&J, you just, again, you have to ask yourself, is it really necessary? Is it safe? And is it effective? And do your research on it and find out if is that the one you want. Now they're saying, well, the J&J, that kind of that leaves people, they don't know what to do because they've just had one. Are they going to need a booster and blah, blah. And it's a mess. So that I don't think is certainly for my choice of the vaccines. Some people say, well, it's the worst, it's the lesser of the evils. And I don't see it that way. I see that it also has its complications too.
And what we really want to do today on this podcast is to educate you, help you self-inform, help you know what to research now that you've had a nice deep question about it. And at True Wellness, we are going to have a question and answer webinar available to you. The information is below, so that in a week's time, 2 weeks time from this podcast, you'll be able to just in a group session, be able to ask your questions. Believe me, the questions that you have are not atypical. We've all had these questions. We're all researching as fast as possible because this is all new uncharted territory. All of it's, you know, we're all in one great science experiment called life. Bottom line is, and the choices we make every day are helping our body either replicate and regenerate or degenerate. And that's what the tenets of bioregulatory medicine are all about, and where you are on that biological division of homotoxicology, which if you don't know what that is, you really need to go to Dr. Odell's website, but you can to the BRMI website. It will absolutely educate you about that. But we really deeply appreciate your time, your research, your caring, and I'm going to give you the last words, Dr. Odell. Say what you want to say to the community, and I pray that you all, you know, send this out to those that have questions, continue to question, and question. The only authority is you. That means from self. That's what the word authority means, is from self. The only authority you have to abide by is yourself, because that's who you have to wake up every day and look at. Dr. Odell, take it away.
Well, you know, they say that there's 3 ways that we acquire knowledge, and the first way is through our gut, and it's kind of like we have a dog sense about things. Is this right or is this wrong? And that I think that's important, to keep your dog sense, to keep your kind of inner guidance system awake and alert. The second way is through doing our due diligence and doing research. That's also equally important in collecting information and finding out, you know, what's important for you. And it helps to empower you. The third way is through authority. We listen to the media, we listen to an authority figure, and we say, okay, I'll do that. But the first two ways are very important, and I just want you to consider them as your guiding principles in following this through, in researching it for yourself. You have to feel it comfortable in your gut. If you don't, then there's something wrong. Secondly, you have to do your due diligence. Just don't go by authority. You just don't say because the doctor said so or the media said so. That's a disaster way to get information. But so I'm just going to leave you with that idea. And I really appreciate being on your program, Kelly, and I really wish everyone well, and be safe, be well. And
Get on zinc. Get on some zinc, y'all. No matter where you're at, where you are, zinc is the answer.
Zinc. Yes.
Zinc. Thank you so much, Dr. Odell.
You're welcome.
From our heart to yours, we will see you next time on The Beats.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Hello, and thank you so much for joining us and spending your time here with us at The Beats with your host, Kelly Kennedy. And I know today more than ever before, you now know better how your body works. And at the very least, we hope we've helped you raise some questions and help you continue to investigate. We are here to help you naturally optimize a better version and vision of yourself on every single level. And after today, you can better engage your innate intelligence and allow for proper regulation and proper regeneration. Make sure to subscribe to never miss a beat again. We hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. And just a reminder that this podcast is for educational purposes only. This podcast is not a substitute for medical advice or professional advice and care by your doctor or other qualified medical professionals. This podcast is created with the intention to provide information and education. This podcast is created with the understanding that it does not constitute professional advice or medical services. If you are looking for help in your journey and seek a qualified medical practitioner, or if you're looking for a biological, not meds practitioner, we can help you. Someone who's trained and a licensed health coach and someone that can help you make changes, especially when it comes to your health. That's what Not Meds mission is about. I hope you have enjoyed listening again to this podcast. It's one of my favorite things to do. And if you do, please feel free to share it with your friends, your colleagues, for the tips of living the biological foundational life and living in the flow. And if you have been listening and love the show, please do leave comments. We love reading your comments. We really do. And you can subscribe to us wherever you hear your podcast. Thank you so much from our heart to yours.